On the morning of December 28, 1835, a column of U.S. soldiers marched north along a narrow military road through the Florida wilderness. The forest was quiet, too quiet. Hidden in the palmettos ahead, nearly 200 Seminole and Black Seminole warriors waited patiently for the soldiers to step into the open. Within a few hours, 107 men would be dead, and the ambush that unfolded here would ignite one of the longest and most brutal wars in American history. Today, this quiet stretch of pine forest is preserved as Dade Battlefield Historic State Park, and walking these trails now, it's hard to imagine the violence that once erupted here. But the land remembers. By the 1830s, Florida had become a flashpoint. The United States had recently acquired the territory from Spain and was eager to expand plantations and settlements southward. But Florida wasn't empty. It was home to the Seminole people, a nation formed from several native groups along with black allies, many of whom had escaped slavery and found refuge among them. For slaveholding states across the South, this alliance posed a serious threat. A free, armed territory along their border could become a sanctuary for enslaved people fleeing North Florida plantations. The federal government's solution came in 1830 when President Andrew Jackson signed the Indian Removal Act. The policy ordered native nations east of the Mississippi River to relocate west to lands in present-day Oklahoma. For the Seminoles, this removal was formalized in the Treaty of Payne's Landing. Many Seminole leaders claimed the treaty had been signed under pressure and deception. To them, leaving Florida meant abandoning their homes, their ancestors, and their identity. So they refused. Leaders like Osceola, Micanopy, and Jumper began preparing for a conflict they believed was inevitable. Tensions grew especially dangerous near Fort King, where Indian agent Wiley Thompson aggressively enforced removal policies. By late 1835, the situation had become explosive. Florida was a powder keg, and the fuse was burning. Marching directly into that tension was Francis L. Dade. In December 1835, Major Dade received orders to lead a relief column from Fort Brooke to reinforce the vulnerable garrison at Fort King. The journey would take them nearly 100 miles through dense wilderness. Dade's command included about 110 soldiers along with a small 6-pound cannon. The march began on December 23rd. Almost immediately, the soldiers noticed troubling signs. A bridge had been burned. Tracks suggested they were being watched. For several days, Dade kept scouts moving along both sides of the road to guard against ambush. But as the march continued without incident, the tension slowly eased. 2 days before reaching this location, Dade made a decision that would prove disastrous. He called the flankers back into the column. Without scouts watching the forest, the soldiers marched in a tight line down the road, completely exposed. Unseen by the soldiers, roughly 180 Seminole and Black Seminole warriors had already taken their positions in the tall grass ahead. They waited silently. Shortly after 8 a.m. on December 28th, the trap was sprung. From the brush, Chief Micanopy raised his rifle and fired at the officer riding at the head of the column. Major Dade fell instantly. That shot was the signal. Warriors rose from the palmettos all around the road and unleashed a devastating volley. More than half the soldiers were killed or wounded in the first moments. The survivors scrambled for cover behind fallen pine logs and hastily built a small triangular barricade. Command now passed to Captain George Gardiner, who tried desperately to organize a defense. The soldiers managed to fire their cannons several times, briefly pushing the attackers back, but the Seminole warriors knew the terrain. Moving through the palmettos, they slowly picked off the trapped soldiers. The battle lasted for hours. By the end of the afternoon, the firing from the soldiers' barricade had stopped. An entire U.S. Army command had been destroyed. Of the roughly 110 soldiers who began the march, 107 were dead. Only 3 men survived. 2 of them, Privates Ransom Clark and Joseph Sprague, managed to escape despite severe wounds. Clark eventually crawled and staggered nearly 60 miles back to Fort Brooke. Their accounts are the only detailed descriptions of the battle from the soldiers' perspective. Another survivor, the column's guide, Luis Pacheco, was captured during the ambush. Historians still debate whether he secretly warned the Seminoles about the march. But this ambush was only part of a larger plan. That same day, Osceola led another Seminole war party to Fort King, where he personally killed Indian agent Wiley Thompson. 2 coordinated attacks, both successful, both designed to send a message. The Seminoles had declared war. The attack at Dade battlefield shocked the nation. Newspapers quickly labeled it the Dade Massacre. Public outrage led to a massive military response. The conflict that followed, the Second Seminole War, would last 7 brutal years. It became the longest and most expensive of all the American Indian Wars. At its peak, the United States deployed over 30,000 soldiers in Florida. They fought fewer than 2,000 Seminole warriors who used the swamps and forests to wage a relentless guerrilla campaign. By the time the fighting faded in 1842, more than 1,500 U.S. soldiers had died. Thousands of Seminoles had been captured and forced west, but not all of them. A few hundred Seminoles refused to surrender and retreated deep into the Everglades. The descendants still live in Florida today, a people who can proudly say they were never conquered. Today the battlefield is peaceful. Tall pines sway in the wind, and a quiet walking trail follows the route where the soldiers once marched. One of the most striking landmarks here is an enormous oak tree, sometimes called the Witness Tree. The first time my son and I visited this park was back in 2019. He was 15 then, and struggling to walk because of severe spinal issues we didn't fully understand yet. We walked the trail slowly that day. Eventually, he sat down on a stone bench to rest while I continued over to see the old oak. Last week, we came back again to film this episode. He ended up getting the best shot of the tree, perfectly framed with the park sign in front of it. And on the way in, he rescued a little box turtle from the middle of the road. Standing here now beneath those branches, it's strange to think how quiet this place feels today compared to what happened here nearly 2 centuries ago. If you enjoy exploring forgotten history across the South, subscribe to Travel Made Personal for more stories from the backroads and battlefields of America. And let me know in the comments, Had you ever heard of the Dade Massacre before today?